And he was like, oh, and he'd attempt to beat it. And it became so intolerable that my assistant, who happened to be around, quit because he couldn't take it anymore. Yeah, the air had gone cold, and then he quit. I wanted to quit too, because I knew that I didn't wish to work with him. Yeah, Mel Gibson has never been known to keep his mouth shut. For years, the Oscar-winning actor and director has generated as much headlines for his scandals as for his movies. From public meltdown bombshells to allegations of anti-Semitism, Gibson's legacy has ever been tainted by a shadow of scandal. And now he's gone further and actually named the 5 Hollywood stars that he freely admits he loathed to work with. These aren't general grumbles or studio murmurs. These are harsh, candid shots delivered by an actor who famously quipped, "They take it up the ass. This is only for taking, It's crude, it's ugly, and it's quintessential Gibson. Furious, unrepentant, and not willing to work according to Hollywood standards. From jarring insults to unsettling run-ins, this list will have you looking at some of Hollywood's biggest stars in a whole new way. And believe me, number 3 will leave you agog. Number 1, Winona Ryder. The vast universe of Hollywood, and most rivalries there originate from egos colliding on set, battles at the box office, or battered reputations. But occasionally the greatest wounds have nothing to do with professional warfare at all. Sometimes they have everything to do with words. Words said in private that reverberate for decades. For Winona Ryder, one such incident never faded away. It was in the mid-1990s at a crowded party filled with industry moguls. Mel Gibson, one of Hollywood's most bankable stars at the time, having just come off Braveheart and riding high on leading man status, was reigning supreme. Cigars, cocktails, laughter, and the kind of brashness that goes with fame dominated the air. Then things shifted. Winona Ryder, accompanied by her close friend Kevin Aucoin, the popular celebrity makeup artist, gay and renowned in fashion in Hollywood, explains that she was the focus of Gibson's biting wit. Gibson allegedly had turned to Aucoin with a smirk and asked him, "Oh, wait, am I going to get AIDS?" The question was not only coarse, it was cruel. This was the height of the AIDS crisis, when homophobia still carried deadly weight. And then it got worse. As the conversation drifted to Ryder's background, she mentioned she was Jewish. Gibson, Ryder insists, looked her in the eye and fired off a slur that left her stunned. "You're not an oven dodger, are you?" The term, a horrific allusion to Holocaust victims, was not only an insult to Ryder, whose relatives had perished in Nazi concentration camps. It was an assault on her identity, her past, and her suffering. Years later, Ryder informed the Sunday Times, "It is a raw and terrible memory for me. I've lived with it all these years. I'm not religious, but I do identify. I had relatives who perished in the camps." To her, this was not gossip. This was trauma. Mel Gibson has never owned up to the comments. His camp retaliated strongly, labeling Ryder's version as 100% untrue. They attacked her for spreading a falsehood she had first uttered in 2010 in a GQ interview. Gibson himself has never actually apologized, but only maintained that he was unfairly targeted in general. "This is absolutely false," one of his representatives responded. "She lied about it over a decade ago, and she's lying now." But Ryder held firm. She doubled down in interviews, stating that Gibson subsequently attempted to apologize to her, but never came across as sincere. She made her thoughts plain in a comment to the Post. "I believe in forgiveness and redemption, and hope that Mr. Gibson has found a healthy way to cope with his demons, but I am not among them. Only by taking responsibility for our actions in this life can we make amends and truly respect each other." Number 2, Pedro Pascal. Mel Gibson always felt that acting should be separate from politics. To him, the screen is a holy ground, one where the story is king and individual agendas are checked at the door. A job of the actor, in his opinion, is to become one with the role, not utilize it as a megaphone. So, when Pedro Pascal became famous with The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, bringing his politics along with him, Gibson did not see bravery. He saw pollution. The conflict wasn't about people initially. It was about ideas. Gibson observed as Pascal became Hollywood's new favorite, an actor hailed not merely for his acting, but also for his vocal positions on social and cultural issues. To Gibson, this all kept blurring the lines between character and celebrity, story and statement. In an interview, Gibson expressed his frustration. Actors today seem more interested in preaching than performing. Pedro Pascal, he's one of those guys. Every role feels the same, and every time you turn around, there's another political message. That's not acting, it's campaigning. It was not the first time Gibson had railed against the confluence of politics and fame, but with Pascal, his tone was more acidic. Gibson faulted Hollywood for hypocrisy, for awarding Pascal not solely on his skill, but because, in Gibson's words, his views match theirs. Pascal, in turn, did not leave the assault unanswered. Popular for his humor as well as warmth, he replied indirectly on social media, sharing a quote that quickly resonated with fans as relating to Gibson's criticism. Art is political. Silence is political. Every decision we make as storytellers speaks to the world we inhabit. If that upsets someone, perhaps they're the issue. Number 3, Christopher Walken. Mel Gibson once referred to Christopher Walken as the Antichrist. Gibson has always worn an air of intensity, a sort of religious belief in the world, art, and the occult forces that seep beneath both. To him, every meeting is imbued with significance, each decision guided by fate. So he was prepared when he ran into Christopher Walken one evening on the rooftop of a New York building to find eccentricity. Walken, after all, was Hollywood's go-to oddball. What he did not anticipate was a sense of fear. It began innocently enough. Gibson was contemplating casting Walken in a film and decided to listen to him. But the moment Walken walked in, Gibson remembered something was not right. He drifted in sideways through a crowd of people. Gibson said he was dressed in black, and it was like one of those old vampire films where they don't walk, they glide. Gibson's imagination kicked in right away. What was supposed to be a relaxed conversation about movies soon turned sinister. Walken started explaining torture machines, medieval torture equipment in graphic detail. My assistant was there, Gibson recalled, and he quit because he couldn't take it anymore. The air had chilled. I wanted to quit too, because I knew I didn't want to work with him, and he was getting terrifying. The contrast could not have been more jarring. Walken flourished in his offbeat orbit, fated for his strangeness. Gibson, on the other hand, bore the rooftop memory as a wound, believing that something dark had transpired between them. The trade noticed. Walken continued to get parts with visionary directors from Tarantino to Spielberg, his quirky cadence and unnerving charm rendering him invaluable. Gibson, meanwhile, fighting off the demons of his own scandals, doubled down on not ever appearing on screen with him. I knew I didn't want to work with him, Gibson reiterated years afterward, long after Walken had long since moved on. The feud never grew into shouting arguments or public sparring. It wasn't necessary. The tale itself, retold and replayed, was stranger than fiction. Gibson and Walken are light years apart nowadays, one reading portents where the other is reading tales. One is pronouncing omens and the other shrugs and dances with that unplaceable Walken weirdness. They will never collaborate. They will never make peace. In Gibson's imagination, Walken is not merely an off-screen actor he dislikes. He's a sign, a symbol, even a threat. And in Walken's, he's likely still laughing at the thought that of all the characters he's ever played, the most bizarre of all is the one Mel Gibson gave him off-screen, the devil. Number 4, Robert De Niro. If one thing gets under Mel Gibson's skin, it's when actors confuse craft with politics. To him, film is a holy place founded on story, truth, and discipline, not a pulpit for campaign rhetoric or political missionary work. Gibson had great respect for Robert De Niro for years. He referred to him as a giant, even admitting films like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull had informed his own sense of performance. But admiration gradually turned to something else, disappointment. Along came 2023. Rumors circulated on social media that Gibson had dropped out of a $33 million film with De Niro, reportedly calling him a creepy little guy. The quote went viral, although it was actually done in satire. Nonetheless, the damage was already done. People thought it was true because it sounded like something Gibson would say. De Niro, however, doubled down on his political soapbox. In speeches, he excoriated Donald Trump, inveighed against alternative facts, and established himself as Hollywood's elder statesman of truth-telling. Lying has become normal, De Niro declared at the Gotham Awards. And it's killing us. Gibson rolled his eyes. That's the problem, he apparently told a producer. It's not about the art anymore. It's about the applause you get for your politics. So, where are they now? The short answer, still separate. No reconciliation dinners, no hushed evening talks, no postponed projects in the pipeline. Industry players describe that the two actors admire each other's skill set, but the ideological gap between them is too great to be bridged. To Gibson, De Niro embodies all those things that debase the craft, an actor-activist who prioritizes politics over performance. To De Niro, Gibson is an embarrassment besmirched by his own controversies, a human being he'd not want to share a stage or screen with again. And so, what had started as admiration on both sides has soured into private contempt. In the rich, complex history of Hollywood feuds, this one may never have a neat resolution. Number 5, Alec Baldwin. If Mel Gibson hates anything more than hypocrisy, it's not clear what it is. Hollywood is brutal when it punishes certain actors for their transgressions, he sees, but oddly tolerant when it comes to others. And when the tragic shooting on the Rust movie set occurred, killing cinematographer Helena Hutchins, Gibson recognized in Alec Baldwin the ultimate symbol of that hypocrisy. To Gibson, the issue wasn't the accident itself. It was Baldwin's response afterwards. Where Gibson felt a man had to take full blame, Baldwin seemed, at least to Gibson, to shift the blame elsewhere in the direction of armorers, assistants, anyone but himself. He fires the gun and then claims it was somebody else's fault. Gibson is said to have told a colleague, "If it were me, they'd bury me alive. But him, they circle the wagons to protect him." That resentment cut deep. Gibson, himself a veteran of a decade plus, spent fighting to overcome the shadow of his own controversies, his infamous DUI arrest, his anti-Semitic rants, his career exile. Saw Baldwin as a man who, for all the tragedy that had occurred on his watch, still had powerful corners of Hollywood covering for him. To Gibson, that was not justice. It was cronyism. The two men were never close. Baldwin, never shy about his politics, frequently shot at the type of conservative sentiments Gibson occasionally aligned himself with. Gibson, to his credit, had little time for what he once referred to as actors who believe a soapbox is stage property. But after Rust, it got personal. On Australian radio, Gibson made a thinly disguised comparison of himself to Baldwin. "You make a mistake in this town. Some people never let you forget it. Others, they'll bend over backwards to excuse it. I don't need to name names. Everyone knows." And so, what might have been a fleeting disagreement firmed into something quite other, a feud based not merely on tragedy, but on the very issue of who gets forgiven and who does not in Hollywood. In the end, Mel Gibson,